alaikum and Eid Mubarak. Here's wishing everybody who is celebrating Eid a very happy Eid. Eid ul-Azha, as we all know, is not only a time of sacrifice. We also understand the fact that it is also a time of being more generous towards other, being more compassionate towards other, and of course, celebrating Eid with our beloved ones. Having said that, today on this very special Eid show, we will be celebrating Eid with our viewers out there, and of course, with this wonderful lineup of guests that we do have with us in the studio today. We'll not only be talking about the true essence of Eid, but we'll also be sharing the unique perspectives that all of our guests do have on it too. So without wasting more time, let me introduce you to this wonderful lineup of guests that we do have with us in the studio today. My first guest for today's special Eid show is Sheikh Jahangir Saab. He's an Islamic scholar. Assalamu alaikum, sir, and he's wishing you a very happy Eid. Thank you for joining us. My second guest for today's show is Ms. Sadia Salman. She's an entrepreneur and she's also a nutritionist. Assalamu alaikum, thank you for joining us, and here's wishing you a very happy Eid too.
Same to you, Fatima.
Thank you for joining us, Sadia. My third guest for today's show is Ms. Amna Tahir. She's an educationist and she's also a social worker. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Fatma.
Wishing you a very happy Eid.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. And my fourth guest for today's show is Ms. Sana Khurshid. She's a disability rights advocate and she's also a lawyer. Assalamu alaikum, Sana, and here's wishing you a very happy Eid too.
Assalam and Khair Mubarak.
Thank you for joining us today. To start the conversation with you, sir, so when we do talk about Eid ul-Azha, we all understand the fact, and this is something that I said in my introduction as well, that yes, of course, it gives us those lessons of sacrifice, of devotion, and reiterates our faith too that way as well. But at the end of the day, when we talk about this more so from a social angle, what are the values that it then imparts in us, not only as individuals, but as a community at large too?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and Eid Mubarak to all our viewers and also those who are not our viewers. The primary purpose of any sacrifice is that the benefit of the sacrifice doesn't go to Allah Himself, of course. The benefit of that sacrifice is twofold. One, the person gets a reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for making that sacrifice, and two, they benefit physically or financially, and in this case, in case of the meat being distributed, it goes to the other people who less fortunate than you, those who are your friends as well, and of course your own self, because there are three parts that you distribute.
Right, sir.
So the sacrifice actually is also about sharing with those around you.
Right, sir, because then when we do talk about the true spirit of Eid, it is definitely about giving back to the society, more particularly to the marginalized and of course the less fortunate groups. Coming towards you, Sadia, and talking about particularly from your viewpoint, because we do understand the fact that yes, you are a full-time working person. So how do you manage those roles of being a businesswoman, being an entrepreneur, and then being a full-time nutritionist too, that too in Eid? Because a lot of times we see that women who are working, somehow they have to make a compromise somewhere.
Thank you so much, Fatma, for this question, and thank you so much for having me on
You're
the
most
show.
Welcome.
And Eid Mubarak to everybody, all our audiences today. So that's a very good question. Actually, all the women who are working have to make compromises one time or the other. And Eid and special festivals like that are specifically those occasions where you somehow feel that, you weren't given enough time to prepare and you were lacking in some way. But I think it's just the right balance of things, and I think we should take it lightly and not kill ourselves over not being able to do as much as maybe a homemaker would be able to do.
Right.
But I think it's just about keeping your priorities right, because on an occasion like this, your priority should be your home and your family, and give them more time, and work can wait.
On which I'll come to you, Amna, and I would want you to add to this further. So when we do talk about your own viewpoint, we also understand that you are also full-time working. But when it comes to having that right balance on Eid, do you feel that that's more easier said than done? Because at the end of the day, I feel that for working women, special occasions like Eid, there might be that one opportunity to indulge in self-care and self-compassion.
Well, Fatma, on a lighter note, the fact that I'm not married,
That helps.
that really helps. But still, that does not spare me from being a good daughter. And the fact that I'm very close to my family, I genuinely look forward to such big occasions because we're a very close-knit family. And so I take on the role of a cook. On other days, I'm not frequent at cooking. I'm not usually found in the kitchen, but it's occasions such as these that I genuinely want to cook. And I think a dish that we're all associated with, the famous mutton biryani. So that's a given on every
And not to
Eid.
forget the mithas and the desserts.
For
of course.
sure, yes. So coming back to your question, you have to find time. Otherwise, there is no way that you're going to enjoy all these family ties or occasions. So
also get to meet so many people who in the normal course of things you get a chance to meet. For example, people are flying in from different countries because of the Eid holidays too, and you're seeing those relatives who you might not have that opportunity to see throughout the year. But Sana, when we talk about your Eid, like what is your typical Eid day like and how do you feel it changing over a period of time? Because we have seen, we do talk about this both from a social as well as from a cultural perspective, the typical Eid celebrations, they have changed somehow.
They have definitely changed. I mean, I look back and, you know, just think of the Eids that we spent as children. I think the excitement was on another level. The whole family used to get together. It was like a fun, joyous occasion. And I think now over time, it's an effort for the whole family to get together.
True.
And I don't know where this happened and why did this happen.
And also those rituals, Sana, like those rituals of writing personalized cards to people, that has also gone.
I mean, that was such a big thing. And between friends, we used to like silly jokes and then just distribute them among friends. And you know, one of my favorite childhood memories of Eid is this was a tradition between me and my father that I used to go and buy the bakra with him. I mean, I used to be so scared, but my father used to take me. And you know, and we'd go to that mandi and select the bakra, and I used to be so scared. It used to smell, and you know, but
and that was an experience in itself.
Yes, now looking back, you know, this is one of the most wonderful times that I bonded with my father.
Of course. And you know, when we talk about the stages in life that you go through as a child and of course then growing up, I think the importance of Eid, that completely changes, because when you're growing up, it's more about the whole act of witnessing the whole act of Qurbani. But when you're perhaps older, it's also about, you know, perhaps giving back to the society and showing more gratitude towards very notion of this festive occasion. Sir, I'll come to you and I would want you to add to this too, because you are the most senior on the panel today. So how have your Eid celebrations evolved over a period of time? Because we also understand the fact that you do come from a generation where Eid festivities were typically not celebrated with the influx of social media.
Well, yes, social media has changed communication and also it has affected relationships. But how it has really evolved, like you asked, is that I think there's a shift in gender roles also.
True.
So traditionally, let's say 35 years ago, it was the men would just lounge around, you know, all day on a holiday, maybe it could be Eid also. And the women would spend most of the time in the kitchen and making sure everybody was happy, getting their kind of food and their type of tea or their type of whatever. I think what society needs to understand that this gender role has shifted now. The single parents also, the single mothers, single fathers.
Right.
There's single women who never decide to get married. And I think what we need to shift, it has shifted a bit, but through this program, I like to remind people that this is everybody's holiday. Let everybody
And I'm
enjoy.
very glad you did just that, because you see, this again is perhaps a bigger issue to women who perhaps belong to rural and remote areas of the country. This might be the case for women who are educated, who belong from sheltered backgrounds in the urban cities of the country. But what about those people who are working or who are living in the remote areas? So, but when we do talk about the general festivities, I think a question which is very relevant in this regard is also the fact that when it comes to our social norms, more particularly for women, there is always this pressure, you have to put your best foot forward, you have to look really good. But when we talk about Islamic perspective, how important is it for any Muslim, be it a man or a woman, to dress up well, that too on occasions like Eid?
Well, this is more of a cultural thing. And I, for one, almost 20 years ago, gave up wearing new clothes on Eid. But the reason was it became a pressure sort of a thing, that you have to get new clothes, you have to wear new clothes. The Sunnah method is to have a better set of clothes. So if you wear a special sort of a dress or certain clothes on Eid day, but there should not be a pressure. However, There's nothing wrong with this culture also.
Right.
For a person who is able to, within his or her means, to dress up and to enjoy the festivities, to meet with people, well, let's not get too carried away in that as well. Let's make it something to have fun.
So, because when we do talk about this of course should be a personal choice at the end of the day. Coming towards you, Ms. Sadia, I would want you to add to this, but from a women and a fashion-centric viewpoint. So, when we do talk about the ever-evolving fashion choices and latest trends that we do see in this regard, we generally now see that women, more particularly Pakistani working women, they opt for perhaps more minimalistic and more simpler designs, that on occasions like Eid. So, how do you see this trend evolving over a period of time?
Yes, Fatma, I think we've all noticed this change over the years. I mean, like 20 years ago, people will literally go overboard with, all the preparations, and even if they didn't have that much money, they would actually probably just borrow it, or they will store the money for it. They will just keep it, every month they would keep a small stock in stock just for these occasions, which I don't think is, it's not pragmatic. So as culture has evolved, and as more and more women are working and they realize that it might be just a waste of money, and it can be used on better purposes. So I think people have evolved in that, and fashion has changed a lot. And I can see that even these big fashion brands, they have launched their new, more pragmatic kind of minimalistic kind of designs.
That's so true. And everybody has that very basic pret line, because I feel designers, they also want to now cater to the masses at large rather than a certain strata of the Pakistani society. But you see, another very interesting angle which I would want to put to you is the fact that a lot of times we see that on occasions like Eid-ul-Azha particularly, people end up eating too much. They are overeating, then they are falling sick, they have gastric issues, they are rushing to the hospitals. So when we talk about this issue of overeating, as a nutritionist, how would you advise people indulge, have their enjoyable time with food, which they are definitely looking forward to throughout, but then of course do it in a manner which is balanced and it is healthy for them?
Yes, thank you so much for asking that question, because many of our clients who eat perfectly fine during the entire month, but as soon as one of the Eids arrives, they go overboard, because we are off with our meals on Eid for 3 days. So all through the year, off 3 days on Eid ul-Fitr and 3 days on Eid ul-Azha. So those 3 days they indulge so much, and literally, I'm not kidding you, they do end up in the ER.
Right. What would you advise them to do in this regard? Because you see, then again, this is a matter of having nutrient-rich foods, but having them in the right proportion. You don't need to pile yourself up.
Exactly. So just remember that the food is always going to be there. It's not like only going to be there for Eid. And you have been eating meat throughout your life. It's not that these are only 3 days that you're going to have it. Also, from a nutritionist perspective, I would like to tell everybody that, the portion sizing is important. So you must have everything, and if you're going to indulge into the meaty dishes more on Eid, that's fine. But then again, balance it out with some vegetables or maybe some fruits, or just do another fasting day after 3 days.
And also to keep
something.
yourself hydrated, because since it's so hot on Eid, since the past few years, on which I'll come to you, Ms. Amna. You see, we all have that one most favorite, rather the most fondest memory of Eid, or more particularly from our childhood days too, because I feel that is that one time of one's life. This is something, which Sana was earlier saying too, in which you really cherish all those little things about Eid, about Eidi, about also, of course, the whole experience of seeing Qurbani, so to speak. So what is that one most fondest memory that you would want to relive with us today on the show?
I think there are many fondest memories that I want to relive every year. Two stand significant to me as an individual. The first, well, nowadays we are outsourcing Qurbani, so I think that sort of has lost its essence over the past many years. But my fondest memory is waking up on the first day of Eid and knowing that Qurbani will happen and the butcher will come, and then preparing everything beforehand, and also feeling sad at the same time.
You see, the wait to that was so exciting, and having the animals before that, taming them and having that emotional attachment with them, that was something so memorable.
I remember bawling my eyes out every time my goat would go around the corner, and I know that it's the end. But also I would get to enjoy the same meat on the third day. So the
True.
same meat I get to barbecue and enjoy with my paternals. That's something that I really, really miss, because
Right.
we've all grown up, we've all moved to different states and countries.
Yes.
So,
So you don't get that privilege, missing out on the Eid too, because now when you're of course an adult, younger kids, they would expect Eid from you.
We now
So
have
the
to
roles
give, so-
reverse, right, basically.
Yeah.
Coming towards you, Sana, so when we do talk about your perspective, so are you one of those people who like to prep about Eid and more excited in that countdown towards Eid as opposed to the Eid day itself? Because a lot of times we see that people, more particularly women, they have so much in that hype of preparing for Eid that when the Eid day comes, they perhaps might not feel that hype on that particular day.
I think for us, I think the whole prep is done by our mother. So the highlight of the day is.
So you don't eat shop at all?
Not really. So yeah, and since COVID, we just shop online. So that whole anticipation is a different sort of a build-up towards Eid, which we do enjoy, obviously. And I think especially now that I have young nieces and nephews, I sort of enjoy Eid through their lens, you know. Like we were talking about Eid, so the roles have reversed. Now I'm the one giving them Eid. So that in itself is like a, you know, fun thing and a new thing. And the whole point and the highlight of the Eid day is waking up, and our mother would prepare like 2-3 meethas, and you know, that would be our breakfast. So yeah, you do look forward to that, and then a whole year my mom doesn't make that sorts of meethas.
Right.
They're like, "Mommy, I mean, make that dry savaiya." She's like, "No, wait for Eid."
So, but when we do talk about this food, of course, we all understand that we are looking forward to indulging in food as it is. But when it comes to meeting people, who is that one person you really look forward to meeting, who perhaps you might not be meeting otherwise in the routine course of things throughout the year?
When my grandmother was alive, so it was a tradition that we would go and meet her. My puppa would always come home. She would come home at 10 o'clock and we wouldn't be ready. And she's like, what are you doing? Why aren't you ready on Eid? Where's your churiyan? Where's your mehndi? Why aren't you guys ready? So I miss that, since these two people played a huge role in celebrating Eid, and they're not there anymore. So yeah, that's life though, but I do miss that.
When you grow up, the phases of Eid and your perspective on it, your insight on it, that completely changes, Sana. So coming towards you, I think one very important question on which we would want you to deliberate upon is the fact that we do understand the fact that yes, Islam places focus on the qualities of the animal which has to be sacrificed. So for the benefit of the audience, can you tell us what criteria is it that animal has to meet in order to be sacrificed?
Well, there's an age for the goat or the ram or the sheep that you use. It's a 2-year age minimum. And then there's a 1.5 years for the bigger animals. And there are certain specific things for every different breed of animal. But there's some primary things, concepts, which I like to pass on today to our audience. The first one is, when you buy something that you're going to sacrifice in the name of the Creator, make sure you buy a good animal.
Right.
Do not save and scrimp on this particular issue. On this particular event, you try to buy the best clothes you can afford, you have the best things you want as
That's
you can
so
afford.
true, sir.
So the animal should also be something which should be a good looking animal. It should fulfill all the animal beauty, whatever points they are.
Right.
But also some people go overboard with that. And then they will spend too much on an animal. And then they would compete with the entire neighborhood and their family on how much they spent. And they will spend 10 or 20 times even the amount on an animal, which they could have bought 20 animals with that.
Right. And sir, also I think a very important angle which emanates from what you're saying is also the fact that a lot of times we see there's too much like pomp and show regarding the animals that you have bought. After the boom of social media, we see so many people actually putting up pictures of sacrificed animals as well, which of course then is very detrimental to the very sanctity of Eid per se. So what would you say to such people out there? Because you see, when you are committing this act of sacrifice, it has to be done in a manner which is then ethical and it is respectful too.
That's very important. It's not just sacrifice in general. I always ask people that they should share their blessings, not display their blessings. So this animal, or being able to buy a very expensive or a good one, does not have to be shown to everyone. It has to be shared with everyone. So focus on the sharing rather than the showing.
And I think it's very important to understand the difference between the two, because you see there is a very fine line. Coming towards you, Sadia, I think here we must also talk about this very rampant issue of food wastage. And I think you would understand this the best because you're a nutritionist yourself. We do see that a lot of times people cook a lot, and then by that virtue they waste a lot too. So how do you propose can people steer clear of this? Because clearly food wastage is something which would of course be a burden not only on the environment but also on a very valuable resources too.
Yes, that's right, Fatma. So we have seen this all over the world, like this is not just in Pakistan, because food wastage is a big issue, and we need to just prepare ourselves that we are not going to eat more than this. Like for example, you will be using small plates. For example, I mean that's one of the ways you need to keep your appetite in check and keep your overindulgence in check is through planning it out. So you eat in small plates, and you know we are 10 people, so just cook accordingly. And I think you shouldn't cook for the whole week. And if you have excess meat in your house,
just cook fresh.
Exactly, and if you don't have, and if you have excess meat in your freezers, don't keep it. I mean that's what we do. Even if Islam says you keep 1/3 of the meat and distribute 1/3 to your relatives and the rest of the 1/3 to the poor and the needy. Even I mean even then, if you don't need it, you can probably just distribute it.
Right.
Or I mean don't fill up your freezers for the rest of the year.
Right. And if you do have any kind of leftovers, then give it
Share
to
it
people.
with people,
Share it
yeah.
with people, because there's so many out there who perhaps can't even afford to have a meal.
Exactly.
To start off with. Sir, but I would want you to add to this further. When we do talk about this, more particularly from the Islamic perspective, what does our religion say when it comes to combating food wastage or being very, of course, careful about it, that too on occasions like Eid, and not only, of course, food itself, but also doing away with the animal skin, because that again is a very pervasive issue too.
Far as skin is concerned, the skin usually goes to whatever tannery can buy them or some other institute which buy them on behalf of charity. And that ought to go to charity, because we are long past the days we would use that skin for ourselves at home. Regarding the wastage is actually an extreme form of overdoing things, of israf. So the Quran says that kulu washrabu, eat and drink, wala tusrifu, and don't overdo it.
Right.
Right. We tend to overdo this, like our nutritionist, she said, that people go all out on the day of Eid, and they eventually also end up in the ER with that. This is a very wrong concept. So if you have so much food, instead of overeating it yourself or wasting it, give it away.
Right.
Especially this time, we've discussed in our family, we cook the meat instead of distributing the raw meat. And on these days, people especially who do not have any monthly job, who work on a daily wages, on the Eid holidays, they have nothing.
Right.
So it's so important. You don't have to give 1/3 to relatives who are already obese, or to myself who is already obese.
So you need to properly evaluate that who are these people who are actually needful by that
who needs it the most.
Right. On which I'll come to you, Ms. Amna, and I would want you to add to this further, but from your own educationist viewpoint. So when we do talk about teaching children that at a primary school level, the very importance of Eid and of course the values that it then teaches us, do you see this happening in Pakistani schools? Because at least abroad in countries like UK and US, we do see that happening. Moreover, we've also seen that in the recent past, Eid has publicly been declared to be now a holiday in some parts of the US.
So, to inculcate such values, Fatma, I feel that it's a triangulation of three factors: parents, the society, and the school. So, the onus does not lie with institutes such as private institutes or public institutes, but also families and society on the whole.
True.
It is the parents' job to make their children feel included, make them a part of the process. So, if the slaughter happens, make sure that your children are there, make sure they are well informed of what this occasion is about and why are we doing it, what's the essence, what's the significance, and also make them a part of the meat distribution process. I think it's a beautiful feeling to hand over food to somebody who's needy and who then says, like, expresses gratitude in return. And also, we're trying to embed this in curriculum, make it a part of the teaching practices. I wouldn't say there's a standalone occasion that we celebrate in schools, but we are trying on the significance of why this stands as an important factor.
And it is very important that you see teachers like yourself, they do that, because I feel that this could be that one occasion using which you could actually impart those values of diversity, of patience, promote those values of compassion and kindness in students too. Sana, but coming towards you, when we do talk about Eid celebrations, we must talk about differently abled persons. We must also equally talk about the trans community and, of course, people who do belong to marginalized groups, so to speak. So when it comes to including them in Eid festivities and Eid celebrations, how particularly do you feel can we do just that?
See, like we've discussed before, the essence of Eid, especially Eid al-Azha, is sacrifice and sharing. So, you know, when you talk about sharing, how can you just ignore a significant segment of your society? So, you know, and like I said before, that it starts from the masjid. You know, we start our day, Eid day, by saying our namaz. So those should be accessible for people with all kinds of disabilities. There should be a spirit of sharing, of helping each other, you know, to make them feel comfortable, and they should be open for all. And you know how we can contribute is to start from home.
Right.
We should include everybody, especially our own domestic help. If we have this beautiful table laden with foods, we need to ensure that our help is also eating the same kind of food and enjoying it. And you know, I feel when we've been put in a position of privilege, of being blessed, it's a huge responsibility on us, because Allah is monitoring how we are using our privilege. And it's a huge responsibility, and we need to ensure that we do it justice. And as you asked, that what can we do to make sure that people with disability especially are included, because that's my line of work, as I mostly advocate for disability rights. You know, the people of disabilities are, you know, the mainstream ones in bigger cities, they might be catered, but the people, the underprivileged people in far-flung areas, they are ignored really badly, because their family also gives up on them, so the society has already given up on them. So what we can do is ensure we find the right NGOs, or maybe take an initiative ourselves, and you know, maybe organize a food drive there and make it accessible for everybody.
Everybody out there.
You know, and you can just contact the local mosque, and the muezzin can make an announcement that at this timing, lunch or dinner or tea, whatever, you know, is going to be arranged. So it's like a small thing, but it is just going to make somebody's day, or maybe the whole half of the year. You know, it's going to, they're just going to look back and say, oh, that was one of the best Eids we had.
Right. Also, and that's very important, because you see, when we do talk about this, I think inclusion is something which we can also, by that yardstick, ensure by giving people your very precious time, because I feel time is one of perhaps the most precious gifts that you can give to people, be it to the trans community, be it to differently abled persons, or even for that matter, people who are in old homes who perhaps might not get that chance to meet their beloveds, that too on occasions like Eid.
And I think, yes, definitely what you said, and maybe add children to that as well.
Right, of course.
Because, you know, we do that, you know, we organize toy drives and EVs, packages for children, because, you know, like I said before, Eid for children is like an excitement on a different level. So you need to make sure that every child, you know, feels that he is also enjoying his Eid.
And they also feel celebrated.
Yes, I think our children might not feel the excitement of wearing new clothes on Eid, but you know, if you give some a child without parents, I don't want to use the other term, gifting them a new suit, you know, or some toys, it's just going to make their lives
it
so
would
wonderful.
mean the world to them.
It would. And you know, these are the little things we take for granted. So I think these are the kind of values we need to inculcate in our children. And I think parents sitting over here and the parents watching, these are the kind of values, the ones you teach your children, for them to grow up as good human beings.
Right. On which I would want you to add to this, because I do understand that you would, being the parent of an autistic child, have a first-hand narrative on this too. So how do you feel can we then make autistic children, or a person with any kind of a disability or special child, more included in Eid festivities?
Yes, Fatma, I've learned over the years, and it hasn't been an easy task, to give priority to your child. And I think that's the only one thing that should be most important on festivals like Eid, specifically because those children are usually, you know, because you're busy with, you know, cooking and looking after the guests and all, and they do get ignored a lot. So you should actually just tell all your relatives and everybody who's visiting you, and they obviously know that you have somebody with special needs at home, and they should come prepared accordingly. And if they're not ready to do that, I would literally literally suggest do not call them over.
Sir, but coming towards you, moving towards the end of this very segment, so when we do talk about, your overall message regarding Eid when it comes to imparting those values of generosity, of selflessness, of compassion, of course, of kindness too, what role do you feel can community leaders and religious scholars like yourself play in this regard? Because of course we do understand that people like yourself, they exert a lot of influence on the Pakistani society as it is.
Well, obviously, all social betterment has to come from leadership itself. But a more practical solution right away I can give is that every parent, both the father and the mother, are also leaders of their tiny community.
True.
And they can change that community. Let's all start changing our own little community so that the larger picture starts to change. So when you give food example, or give away food, and you share or you sacrifice and you distribute, include your whole family,
Right.
the kids also.
Right.
When you distribute food, say on the dastarkhan, make sure everybody sits there. Your sons also sit there, so they also understand and be part of the process.
Right. So basically, all in all, then you must, as parents, lead by example. That is what you mean to say. On which I'll come to you, Sadia, and I would want you to add to this, but more so from your own viewpoint. So when we do talk about businesses, brands giving back to the society, more so on occasions like Eid, how particularly do you feel can they do just that? Because I do understand the fact that a lot of brands, a lot of businesses, they would be having those very commercially motivated, offers in place so as to capitalize on occasions like Eid. But how can they equally be very cognizant of the society and the societal needs too on occasions like these?
Yes, Fatma, corporate social responsibility comes foremost and it should come foremost for all of the businesses, especially if they are run by a Muslim person, because nothing can be achieved without giving due share to the poor or the needy. So every, like for example, I can tell about my company. So we have a whole share of profits that always goes to charity every month, despite it being Eid or not, and then bonuses and everything are specifically given on Eid as well. But I think all businesses should have a policy like that, and I think it will be so much easier for someone to share their, I think it should be a part of the policy. For
right,
all
it should be a part of the policy, and then again you can use social media to that effect too, since you're using social media all year round too. Amna, I would want you to add to that, but more so from the viewpoint of being a young person yourself. How do you feel can we then use the power of social media, of internet, and of advancing technology so as to promote, the true spirit and the true messages behind it, be it those relating to perhaps being more kind to the people around you, be it that those relating to perhaps, being more generous to the people around you. So how particularly do you feel can social media be positively used in this regard?
Well, I'll take a cue from what my fellow speaker earlier said. I believe social media is now being used tremendously just to share videos of animals being slaughtered and how to show and not to share. So that's something that we need to foresee. Sure, you can just put up nice pictures of your animals before they are slaughtered, make sure that they're well decorated, share that essence with your fellow circle of friends. But you see, the algorithm that we set in technology, that plays a huge part, and social media can be used. So, and also something that I really want to add, we have an entire table laden with festivities and food, and while on the other hand there are people who don't have food, so we also need to be culturally aware.
You don't need to glorify all that you do have, because you see, then again that adds to the plight of others, because it puts a lot of social pressure, and this is something which earlier Sheikh Saab was also very rightly so saying. But coming towards you, Sana, and before we conclude today's show, I think a very important angle on which we would want you to comment is the fact that we do understand that you have been the brand ambassador of this road safety campaign. So how do you propose can people, more particularly young people, then steer clear of road accidents, that too on occasions like Eid? Because we do understand the fact that yes, since there's so much traffic on ground, there are definitely greater chances of people being involved in accidents too.
Exactly. I think I was very lucky enough to work with the leading OMCs, which is very, very aware of how safety affects you. And they're very big on safety, not just for their employees or their drivers, but for all road users. And in that, in collaboration, especially with the youth, because you know this youth is our future. I mean, they're the society we're going to become. So we need to inculcate these values that, you know, breaking rules is not cool.
Right.
It's just sheer stupidity.
Right.
And I think especially on occasions like this, in Ramzan, you know, closer to Iftar and on Eid, everybody's rushing to reach their destination. They have these big lunches or dinners. They just forget that this is huge population, a pedestrian population, which is out there going door to door to collect meat, especially on Eid al-Azha. So, you know, you need to ensure that, you know, while you're thinking of celebrating Eid, you need to ensure that let them have a nice Eid as well,
Right,
because, you
of
know, your one mistake, a second of your distraction is going to have
course.
devastating
Right.
consequences.
It can cost somebody their life.
Exactly.
So,
So, you know, that is why we work on road safety, and it is like a message. I know it's like a repetitive message, and everybody knows that we need to follow rules, but we sort of need to hammer them into these children, all sorts of drivers, that these rules cannot be broken.
And I feel in this regard, then again, of course, the responsibility also goes back on the media, because we do see so many things being advertised using media. So why not, you know, make it more socially aware by that yardstick too? On which note, I would like to conclude today's show. Thank you so much, Sheikh Saab. Thank you so much, Ms. Sadia. Thank you so much, Ms. Amna. And thank you so much, Sana, for your precious time today. Well, we had a very interesting discussion with not one, rather quite a few, rather very diverse lineup of guests that we did have in the studio today. We spoke about the true essence of Eid, and we also of course spoke about the unique perspectives of Eid, that too, you know, of course having a detailed discussion on the same from our wonderful guests. But having said that, in my conclusion, the only thing that I would like to say is that don't go anywhere, because we do have another very interesting segment lined up where we'll be talking about the latest fashion trends that you can follow, more so on occasions like Eid. We'll also be talking about, of course, the need for us to very religiously practice road safety too on occasions like Eid. And last but not the least, we'll also be bringing in some very fun and interesting live music to you, that too, of course, on this special occasion of Eid. So don't go anywhere. Keep watching PTV World.